Hi, guys. So, welcome to Lessons for Reparenting Daily. Here, we're joined with Brittany Banks, and she's a therapist who's going to join us with a discussion on reparenting, specifically within the African American community. So, would you like to introduce yourself, Brittany?
Yeah, as you said, I'm Brittany Banks. I have been a therapist for, wow, when did I start? Going into like 5 years now. Um, I recently got fully licensed, so I'm just independent. I consider myself a baby therapist still because there's
Yeah,
so much to learn in this field.
yeah.
Born and raised in Georgia. Moved to Texas probably about 3 years ago. I've been
Okay.
here since. Yeah.
Nice. Congratulations on your license. Did you study
Thank
in
you.
Texas also, or?
No, I actually did
Okay.
all of my studying in Georgia. And
Okay.
then when I moved to Texas, I was working on the requirements to get the licensure.
Sure.
So for therapists, we have to work supervised under somebody who's fully licensed for X amount of hours, depending on the state that you're in.
Sure.
And then once you complete that, you're eligible to get your own independent license.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Congratulations and good luck with
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, can you maybe tell us a bit about your journey into the field? Why did you decide to become a therapist? Did you know about reparenting before this?
Man, did I know about reparenting? No.
Yeah.
Not. This journey has been long going. So I actually knew I wanted to be a therapist in high school.
Okay, that's nice.
Random, but I had my own journey with mental health just growing up. I'm a survivor of CPTSD, so I do have some
Yeah.
childhood trauma there. And it was just really rough growing up. And once I learned what therapy was, I was just like, okay, I want to do that. I want to
Yeah.
help other people who probably have been in my shoes or have done, been through other situations where they need assistance. And so I kind of just followed that path, went, got my bachelor's in psychology, never changed my major. I wasn't one of
Yeah.
those kids like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. I was just straight path. At first, I thought I wanted to go into psychiatry. And then I realized you have to go to med school. And I was like, no. So I
Understood.
changed my mind quickly with
Yeah.
that. And then, yeah, I took a break between my bachelor's and my master's. I was
Mhm.
working for an airline, so I was traveling, doing
Oh,
all kind of
nice.
things.
Yeah.
And in that space, I was kind of just working on my own healing. I didn't know what reparenting was, but I knew that I had to change the way that I operated to have a healthier life and healthier relationships.
But
Right. So it was just really focusing on unlearning some of the things that I learned in childhood, where in regards to like lack of emotional regulation or just
yeah.
dealing with anger or how I view myself, how I criticize myself, all these things that I just
Yeah.
realized would get in the way of having healthy relationships. So I kind of started in my 20s, probably like 20, 25-ish, to
Okay.
take it really serious.
Understood.
Mainly because I knew one day that I wanted to be married and I didn't want to take those burdens into
Sure.
those relationships, right? So
Understood.
that's kind of how it began. And then it
Okay.
just compelled over the years with the things that I've learned and then going
Sure.
through my own therapy, right? And learning
Yeah.
things about myself.
That's great. That's really nice to hear. It sounds like you have a really interesting journey, and I think it's great because you're a therapist who's willing to be honest about their experiences. Because there are many therapists who don't know about CPTSD, they're
Mhm.
not aware of it, and then they're not aware how to work with someone who has it. So, I
Mhm.
mean, you are going to be a great resource after a few years. When you really get into the swing of things, and I
Yeah.
mean, because you have the real experience and you're walking the walk.
Mhm.
And so we need people like you, and I'm so happy to have met you, and I wish you all the best in
Thank
your
you.
career.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, as we go on to look into the topic now, I reached out to you because February is coming up. It's going to be African
Mhm.
American History Month,
Yeah.
and I really want to include some more people of color on my podcast to really talk about reparenting from a different perspective.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, I've been working with the ACA program, the Adult Children of Alcoholic and Dysfunctional Families program. I think we
Okay.
briefly discussed that earlier. It's a
Mhm.
12-step program that's similar to AA, but it's for people coming from dysfunctional families.
Yeah.
The alcoholic is a bit alcoholic or dysfunctional families. They're thinking to rename that because you don't have to come from an alcoholic family actually to end up with dysfunction. So it can
That's
just
very
be a
true.
dysfunctional family. So, but overall, it's been a great community. But what I've lacked is a lot of the African American community speaking to our experience. Now,
Hmm.
there are POC meetings, there are POC LGBTQ meetings, there are LGBT POC men meetings, Black men only. So they are there, but they're few and far in between,
Okay.
and they're still relying on the same material that does not really touch on our pain points. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm looking to reach out to more people and starting this program to kind of fill that in for some people, you know? And
Hmm.
so the first part that we wanted to start off discussing is parenting practices in the African American community. And we're talking about within the US for context for the international viewers, because both of us are have grown up in the US on the East
Hmm.
Coast. So we're familiar with that Southern, maybe Baptist, you
Yes.
know? So I mean, it's taken me a long time to actually dissect the Baptist church. And I mean, there's a lot good there, but there's a lot that's just really, it's been manipulated actually by, when the segregation and Jim Crow was breaking down,
Yeah.
these forces actually manipulated the Southern Baptist Church intentionally.
Hmm.
Did you know this history to actually cause more problem, to sow more discord, So even the church has been weaponized against our own community,
Wow.
And I'm a political philosophy, political economy person, so I read a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
history, and when I came across that, it just really made me take a step back to realize that my own religious institution that I grown up with was infiltrated by someone who is trying to attack
That
us.
is a
So
new point for
that
me.
is a
Do you
very
mind
interesting
elaborating a little
point.
bit on that?
I did not prepare all of the history on that. I should have beforehand.
No, it's
I
okay.
believe I cannot remember which book it was from, but I believe that the way that they taught the black pastors to become certified, the way
Yeah.
that they would teach them the material was, biased. They would,
Mm.
yeah, I wish I could come up with specific examples right now, but perhaps I'll make like an extra bonus episode once I do some research because it's a
Yeah,
really
that's
interesting
yeah,
story and it has long-lasting implications.
for sure.
And yeah, so I mean, this is not just in the church, but feeding into how do we reparent within the African American community where we're under a system of oppression,
Hmm.
politically, economically, socially.
Yeah,
It adds more complexity to our journey
it does.
as we're
Yeah.
trying to come out of these systems, right? And so as we just take a step back look at that first question. So parenting practices for the African American community within the US.
Hmm.
So some of the legacies that I've noticed have carried down, for example, are like children should be seen and not heard, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's one. That's
Yeah,
common.
what do you think? What's one that comes to mind for you? Yeah, ping
Man,
pong.
children should be seen and I heard is a big one. Other things are just how
Physical
we conduct
spanking, or
ourselves
maybe.
in public in general. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
don't touch anything, don't look at anybody, just
Yeah.
be quiet.
Yeah.
Don't act up in any way, when you're out in public, especially at home, but of course, especially out in public. It's
Yeah.
more heavily criticized. Even in my field, what I'm having to help people unlearn with my African American clients is we have this philosophy of you don't talk about what goes on in this house.
Yeah.
Our business is our business.
Yes.
So it's a very
Yes.
strange concept growing up, having that drilled in your head, and then one day deciding I need to talk to a stranger about my problems and the
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that I have going on. So that's another one that is heavily rooted. It's amazing to me that you can pick a stranger in the community and they can recite some of the same quotes that you might have heard your parents like drill into your head.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one that I combat often in this field is just getting people used to the concept of it is okay to talk about your problems. You don't have
Yes.
to stuff everything in.
Yeah.
You don't have to always be strong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a battle, uphill battle, but we're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely understand that. I mean, some of the things that also come to me are like the corporal punishment. Like it
Mhm.
seems to be really lagging in our community that corporal punishment is not the best
Yeah.
form of punishment or of actually teaching a child something, you're
Hmm.
actually just teaching them that it's okay to hit another person. I mean, that's
Hmm.
actually the lesson that they
Yeah.
will take from that, as well as fear of the parent. And
True.
so, and that's something that is, as the book will discuss in a bit, it's something that carries down from slavery, that harshness,
Hmm.
and that lack of, you mentioned something, the ability to talk with a stranger about your emotions, but what about
Hmm.
with your own family?
Yeah.
I'm so frustrated because so much of my family is really shut down or in denial. They
Hmm.
don't have the awareness or they're not interested, or maybe their life is sailing along fine enough. But I know for quite a few of them, it's not. And I don't
Yeah.
understand, have they not reached the threshold where they just want to talk about it yet? Because I feel I'm so open and many
Hmm.
people are quite open. And as a family, that should be a place where we should be able to come and support each other? I mean,
Yeah. I
ideally.
think,
And
yeah, I think it's just a lack of, it's uncomfortable. The
yeah,
unfamiliar is uncomfortable. If you've grown up generation after generation where nobody talks about their problems,
yeah,
nobody even admits that they did something wrong, it's foreign. And after a certain age, some people become just stuck in their ways and stubborn about it and just don't want to admit. Like, I'll share another personal example. I love my mother, I do. But it took years for her to come to a place of wanting to hear what I had to say about how I grew up and not only accepting it, but apologizing for her part. It took
yeah.
years because I've tried this conversation over and over again, like from teenage all the way into I'm 30, I'll be 35 at the end of this month.
Okay.
So
Congrats.
the first, yeah, first time we really had a meaningful conversation, I was like 31
Okay.
before she was willing to hear
Wow.
me
Wow.
and say, you know what, you're right. I could have did
Yeah.
this better. This is why I did this. And I could tell it was I'm so proud of her and I appreciate her so much. I could tell there was some embarrassment. And it's hard to admit like I messed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I did
understand.
something wrong. I made a bad decision and now I see it has impacted you for the rest of your life. And that's something that I have to deal with or work through and we have to talk through. So it's
Yeah.
difficult. It's
No,
difficult.
that is
And you
challenging.
mentioned like corporal punishment. With that, I agree. Coming from slavery for sure. I think I tell people this because I'm
Mm.
not against spanking altogether, but you have to know your kid. And it's
Yeah.
not the answer to every situation that occurs. The
Yeah.
problem in our community is that most of the time it's done out of anger.
Yeah.
There's no explanation of
Yeah.
why
No
this is
explanation.
wrong.
Yeah.
You don't get a chance to. It's one thing if I tell you, okay, hey, don't do XYZ,
Mm.
and then you deliberately obey me,
Yeah.
disobey me,
Yeah.
and you go do XYZ. But
Mm.
if I do XYZ and we never had a conversation, why is the
Yeah.
immediate response a spanking? So that's corporal
Mm.
punishment is just
Yeah. Or SmackDown. One of the two. I don't know. Yeah. So that is, depends on which one is coming at you. So,
yeah, seriously. I
yeah.
think back on
Yeah.
my own and I'm like, that was a moment I probably should have had a conversation first because how was I supposed to know that was dangerous or that was wrong or that was
Yeah.
inappropriate? No one taught me that.
Now, I mean, that's going down again, going back to this book, this Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome
Mm-hmm.
by Joyce DeGruy. You know, I yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not at that place yet with my mother. I cannot we did not have the same story as you, I'm sure. I'm trying to get there because I see the value in it, but to be honest with myself, I don't feel it and I'm not going to force that because I saw what happened when my mother tried to force it and it's not worth it. That
Yeah.
has to come from within. You can
Yeah.
listen, you cannot force it.
No, you can't.
Um and the solution to that, I think, is just to focus on yourself. But
True.
going back to your point about things that you didn't know or your mother didn't know to teach you, it's because she was not taught.
Yes.
And she was not taught because your grandmother was not taught.
Mm-hmm.
Because your grandmother was maybe owned by somebody in Georgia or something, and like I literally think to it that level. And um, I mean, there's so much pain that has been carried down
Yeah.
beyond, beyond the basics,
Mm-hmm.
of like how to live as a decent human. I mean, there's a lot of pain that has been carried down. And so we're missing a lot of lessons. And I guess it's about finding grace, right? And acknowledging
Yeah.
that they did not have those lessons.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have, access to these books or the resources, the conversation that we're having right now. But I can reflect, and I can see some of the same patterns even within my life that I'm struggling with in my grandmother, for example.
Yeah.
For example, like this workaholism and this extreme need to succeed and pushing, and
Hmm.
and I mean, I know that's part of that is good, but part of that is also, coming from some seeking place,
Yeah.
and or seeking for safety in a way.
Hmm.
And so basically there are many effects. And how do you think that we as a community can raise the level of awareness of that? Because I don't think the awareness is even where it needs to be at. I think it's coming. It's coming. There are more and more Black
Yeah.
therapists, many more Black therapists on podcasts and in media in general. So the awareness is coming, but social media is not there,
Hmm.
And so how do you get people real information? That's something that I aspire to as part of this program is
Yeah.
somehow trying to get this information to a younger audience so they can at least be aware that this is something they might need to consider if they grew
Hmm.
up in a dysfunctional situation. So how do you
Yeah.
think we can do that in our community?
It's exactly what you said. Just
Yeah,
putting the messages out there, creating platforms like this.
yeah,
I'm trying to do my part on social media. Eventually, one day I'll have a podcast as well.
yeah,
Just to just put the information out there. You don't know what you don't know, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
nowadays, people get their information. It's unfortunate and fortunate at the same time, but
Yeah.
but a lot of information they get is just from social media. If it's not a quick sound bite or something that they can look at
Yeah.
in 60 seconds or less, they really aren't necessarily seeking that information.
Mm,
Like you said, it is coming. It's becoming more and more popular. But just having the conversations and being open with people around you,
mm,
being open to talking to people that you wouldn't normally talk to, right?
yeah, yeah,
A lot of times we shy away from conversations with strangers in general, and that kind of puts a barrier between us in passing knowledge and the things
exactly.
that you can learn. You never know, because I say this, no matter the education level of the person that you're talking to, if you're talking to someone you don't know, you're going to learn something regardless. You're going to learn
Exactly.
something regardless because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have a different life perspective, different experiences that they could share and that could enlighten you in something else. And honestly, that's how I learned that people in general share a lot of the same experiences, but
yeah,
we focus so much on our differences
yes.
that
Terminally unique.
yeah, that we don't really we can't form the type of community that we're meant to form in order to help
Exactly.
us grow and heal from all the things that have transpired over time.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, just talking about it, really doing what you're
Yeah.
doing right now. And
Yeah,
eventually
that's
this
good.
stuff like this will be here forever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even
Exactly.
when
I
we're
was
dead
thinking
and
about that just
gone,
before.
yeah, even when we're dead and gone, somebody can pull up this episode or the ones you've done before and after this and listen to do their own research and learn things. So this is
Yeah,
exactly how
yeah,
we change that narrative, really.
yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good to hear.
Mhm.
Yeah, as we look at some different topics, like within your program, like you did a bachelor's in psychology, right? And then
Mhm.
now your certification. Did you do any kind of internships or graduate studies or things like that?
Yes, I had to. So I did a bachelor's of science in psychology.
Okay.
Then I went on to do my master's of science in clinical psychology and counseling.
Hmm.
So in that program, in that master's program, you're required to do an internship to graduate.
Okay.
For my program, it was a year long. So it's
Oh
basically
wow,
working
it's so
as a
long.
therapist. Yeah,
But you did a
working
lot of
as a
hours. Yeah.
uh-huh. Well, actually, it's less hours than is required for licensure. But yeah, we had to work
Okay.
as a therapist in whatever field we got hired in. I ended up working in a hospital, a
Okay.
psychiatric hospital. That was a
Okay.
very
Nice.
interesting experience.
Yeah.
But it was also enlightening to see systemically how unfortunately the US does not put a priority on mental health,
Hmm.
especially in Black communities
Yeah.
or Hispanic communities, because the hospital I worked in was in a predominantly Black area, like
Mm,
I won't say poor, but like poor to middle class in that
yeah.
area, right? And it was a state funded hospital, but you
Yeah.
could tell that the state did not put love into
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
funding. It was scraping by at every turn for resources just to get people basic help and basic needs. From like medication to care to understanding what therapy was and having access to it.
Yeah.
It was painful to
Yeah.
watch, but
Yeah.
inspiring at the same time because it let me know there's work to be done and I can contribute to that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
That's
did the internship there, did all that, got my requirements to graduate. After that, like I spoke of earlier,
okay.
you have to go into a period of working under someone who is already fully licensed.
Yeah.
It's considered like your supervision period.
Okay.
So it's not an internship. You do get paid. You are a licensed therapist, but at an associate
Okay.
level.
Okay.
And you
Okay.
can work independently and do all these things.
Nice.
But yeah, it's set up so that you can work under somebody where you can ask a lot of questions
Okay. Okay. That's good.
and to learn, like, did I do this right? Did I handle this right? How do I
Yeah.
handle these cases? Am
Sure.
I diagnosing properly based on the things that I'm seeing?
Sure.
Just to make sure that you're not running amok when you're set free.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of inevitable from the therapist that I talked to. In the beginning, everyone is learning, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
even some of the great people, if you listen to, who is that, like a Peter Levine or like these really, now they are famous people, they tell
Yeah.
their stories about their first patient and they say, oh my God, I can't believe it, you know,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you
everyone is
learn.
learning,
It's
everyone
learning.
is, it's a learning experience. You said you had studied clinical psychology. Is that teaching you or focusing on how you diagnose or how you view a person? What's the difference in that?
So there are so many different degrees that you can have, but with
Yeah.
clinical psych, there yeah, there is a focus on diagnosis and
Okay.
understanding them
Okay.
so that you can properly treat them.
Okay. Sure.
I was blessed to be in a program. Shout out to Clayton State University. I was blessed to be in a program where my professors were very well rounded. I
Okay.
had actually quite a few African American professors in the
Oh, that's
field who also
beautiful.
had
Yeah.
their own, yeah, they had
Yeah.
their own practices and all
Yeah.
these other things. So
Yeah.
they taught us heavily to not use the DSM, which is the book that we use to diagnose, not use it as law, but use it as a
Yeah.
guide.
Oh my God, I'm so
So,
glad you said that. You don't even need to go anywhere further. Jesus Christ. Just the fact they had that awareness.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
don't like it's not every
Yeah.
and technically I have this belief and they kind of put this to our perspective. Like any diagnosis that you have,
Yeah.
it should be considered to be on a spectrum. I think it's odd that we only do the autism spectrum because
Yeah.
even with depression, there's so many different versions of that and how it looks, and people get misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed, especially in the African American community, because
Yeah.
a lot of times when we're diagnosed with depression or when we have depression, it's high functioning. So it
Yeah.
doesn't look
No
textbook.
option. Yeah. Exactly. You know.
And people will, if you're not culturally aware, people
Yeah.
will overlook it and be like, oh, that person's not depressed.
Depressed.
Absolutely, we are.
Mm.
It's just we've never had a point in history where we were able to rest and
Yeah.
able to acknowledge our emotions and say that I'm tired or I'm
Yeah.
super sad. And at the end of the day, I was talking to a client about this the other day.
Mm.
Historically, it's like, yeah, I'm sad, but these bills have to still have to be paid.
Yeah.
I still have to go to
Mm. It's
work.
the
My
truth.
kids still need me. Yeah,
Mm.
so it doesn't look textbook, but it still exists, and
Yeah.
it's a huge thing that has to be worked on within the field itself because a lot of clinicians are not culturally trained or
Yeah.
aware of the
Yeah.
differences in how certain symptoms might present themselves.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. That's a really good point to mention because it does look different in all of our communities. Maybe
Yeah.
in certain communities, for example, if you think about Asian communities, like how they have
Mhm.
this extreme focus on family.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when they moved to the US, I mean, maybe this is true for Latin families, but I know really for Asian families. So when they
Mhm.
move here into this individual culture, and they have you're trying to talk to a client who's trying to separate from their family in a reasonable way, but their
Yeah.
culture is, pulling them together. So they have so many different forces going on. And you're right,
Yeah.
it's difficult for someone who does not have that understanding of all of those forces that are going on in the background to really
Mhm.
be able to work with you effectively.
Yeah, I have Asian clients, I have Hispanic clients as well.
Yeah.
And I've had them express to me in the past where they've met with therapists that kind of didn't understand the basics of their cultural dynamics.
Yeah.
And we're trying to force the individualistic cultures of the United States
Yeah.
onto them, saying, like, this is wrong. Like, why do you care about what your mom says? Well, because
Yes. Because yeah,
I'm not going to abandon my my
Mhm.
family for the sake of
Yeah.
fitting in the US. So you have to
Yeah.
work around those dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Understood.
so
Yeah.
hopefully there is a push, but it's again, it's at the beginning of the push
Yeah.
for people to be culturally aware and trained.
Yeah.
I also had an Asian professor as well, so I had a well-rounded
This
group
really
of
nice.
teachers. So
Yeah,
she
this is
taught
really
us a
good.
lot. They taught us a lot of things,
Yeah, that's really
and I
nice.
was just, yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So as we look more into the impact of like generational trauma and how these things are actually transmissed down,
Hmm.
um, and then the process of breaking that, but not abandoning your family if you're coming from a different cultural context, or if you simply don't want to take that final step of cutting your family completely off,
Yeah.
whether you can or you don't want to.
Hmm.
How can people work on making that change with considering that's the case, that their family is not working on themselves and they're not willing to address it? I mean,
Oh,
how
that is
much
what I work with every day.
how much contact can they really have? I mean, it's about managing your own internal boundaries, right? Your reactions.
Hmm.
So maintaining that internal locus of control, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to being shifted by the things outside. But I mean, in a normal situation, if something outside is disturbing you, then you go the other way. So it's like you don't just go the other way. And now it's
Hmm.
like, do you have these expectations from society, expectations from your inner child is my mom, your mama, or whatever,
Hmm.
all of your family. I mean,
Yeah.
how have your clients been dealing with that? How have you dealt with that? Maybe you had a period of separation from your mom before you guys rekindled.
Yeah.
Uh,
I actually, yeah, I did. I did.
so yeah, again,
Um,
think about the breaking the patterns and
mhm.
maintaining that. Yeah.
I teach it this way, and I learned it this way. At the end of the day, no matter what, you can only control yourself, right? You cannot control other people. You can't control how they respond to you. You can't control if they're going to be receptive to what you're saying or your needs or sensitive to your boundaries. You cannot control any of that. So cutting off is not something that I emphasize as the initial response unless someone is coming off like strongly and this is what I
Yeah.
need to do. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I will support you through that. But
Yeah.
that's a very hard decision because we need our family.
Mm.
We need people, we need community. And depending on what has taken place, sometimes you're not ready, even though the history might be really ugly, right? Going back to me and my mom, there was a period where I just didn't want to talk to her. I had nothing to do. I didn't. I was struggling with forgiveness of the decisions she made that impacted me, and I didn't really care to connect with her. Well, once I moved out, like for college and all of that, I would talk to her. I don't know how often I would talk to her. I would look at all these kids around me, calling their mom every Sunday or
Yeah.
every day, and I'm just like,
Every day.
yes,
Dude,
some. There are some people that talk to their parents every day. I think
I
it's a
truly
beautiful
never had
thing.
that. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, never. Even today, I don't have that, but we're getting
yeah.
better with how often
Yeah.
we communicate.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I don't have that. I don't desire that because she's never, at that time, she was never willing to admit her wrongs.
Mm.
And for that, it was a barrier within our
Mm.
relationship for me not to move past it. And even when I tried, it was very surface level. So
Yeah.
we wouldn't talk about things past like, how's your day?
The
How's the
weather.
weather? How's work?
Yeah. I'm still trying to let myself be okay with that, but it's
Yeah.
still
And
not there.
I hate that because I'm a person who desires deeper communication and connection.
Yeah.
And so our conversations would be like 5 minutes long, and I'd be like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Not to check
Yeah.
on you.
Yeah.
And eventually I just got sick of it. And I was just like, I'm going to keep trying. And I will, that I tell my clients this too. Just because you try once and the person's not receptive doesn't mean you can't try again later and something changes. Because if
Yeah.
you live by that narrative, then that means you believe that people cannot change.
Yeah.
And if people can't change, that means you can't change.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
true.
Also, yeah. Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
true. And sometimes time and other experiences soften their heart, make them want to listen a little more. Just
Yeah.
you never know. So I've been, like I said, I tried to have that conversation from 13 all the way to 31. 31 is when I finally had the breakthrough. So yeah, there were periods of I tried, and now we're not talking, or we're
Yeah.
talking surface level. And just now in recent years, we've gotten to more deeper conversations about just
Okay.
my experiences and how I've been. So I navigate people through that the same way. I let them make the decision
Hmm.
because I can't tell you what is healthy for you,
Yeah.
right? There are some stories I hear where I'm just like, I don't think I'd be able to talk to that person.
Yeah.
But the client is insistent of, I'm not ready to cut
Yeah.
them
That's
off.
on off. Yeah.
So I have to support them through that journey. I have disconnected with my father completely. So
Okay.
I share both sides of
That's
where like
easy.
you're not
Yeah.
ready and okay, I can't talk to you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have both experiences to kind of guide me through that.
Okay.
But it's tricky to navigate.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I've in that same boat also. I've been in there because I kind of
Mm-hmm.
just left it off with my father, but was trying to work it with my mom. But in a
Yeah.
way, it's kind of like because he just was not there, it's like
Yeah.
less damage in a way. I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, it's messed up to think of it that way, but
Uh-huh.
then when I actually took time to reflect on the effect of his absence, it actually was more profound than,
Yeah.
because most of the extra things I got from my mother, for example, was a lot due to his absence and to his abuse of her.
Yeah.
So, things are also not always as they seem on the surface.
That is correct too.
Yeah. Um, Now let's
You
see
bring
as
up a
we
good point.
can go towards wrapping up. Yeah, as we just look now towards the end of the podcast, we were discussing earlier how we can bring this information into our communities, take more action. Um, do you know of any like programs that are specifically targeted for African Americans that are family focused? Because that's something we
Mm,
haven't talked about yet. Like, I haven't never tried family therapy, to be honest with you. I haven't tried couples therapy because I haven't got to that point yet. Well, I need it,
same.
but I mean, I needed it, but I was not,
Yeah.
it's like, no, we're just gonna end this. But, you know,
Specific programs off the top of my head, no. There are so many resources that need to be created specifically for
yes,
African Americans.
yes,
Um,
we need. Do you know Tim Fletcher?
no, I don't. I don't know who he
We
is.
need him for African American family therapy because he's a specialist on CPTSD, and he's a
Oh,
Canadian. He was a pastor, and
okay.
eventually he transitioned to become a therapist. I'm pretty sure it was this way or maybe the other way
Mhm.
around. So
Okay.
he's incredible because he has a really good knowledge in therapy, CPTSD. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And he also has a biblical side. So he has a great series on YouTube. He does
Uh-huh.
the first half, basically about psychology, all of the facts coming up and experience, and then he relates it to in the second half to a Bible story. Like if you're interested for those kind of people. So I
Yeah.
like the way that he creates it, the style. He's really clear.
Mm.
And I think that this is something that we need for the Black community, but something that's really informing the whole community. So it's important to raise your self-awareness. But
Yeah.
again, as we just discussed, we require understanding our parents in order to be
Hmm.
able to work through our own grief or what is the word, the R word? Um, what do you know when you're holding on to
Grief,
something?
healing.
No, when you hold on
Like
to
holding on
something.
a grudge.
A grudge, yeah, but there's another word when you feel that. Anyway, I'm speaking like three languages at my office, so when sometimes I can't find the
It's
word in
okay.
English, and
It's
I'm
okay.
really not. You know what? You don't know what I'm talking about. The R word when you're like, anyways, yeah, I can't
Resentment.
think. Jesus Christ, yes, that's the word. Resentment. Well, you know the resentment that you're feeling, right?
Yes.
And I think that if we could heal in a family a situational dynamic that helps everyone get rid of the resentment together.
Yes, it
And so
does.
it's such an important resource, but I haven't come across anything. Have you before?
No, I have not.
Mm,
And that is something that I eventually want to work on. But
yeah,
again, people have to be open to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. And
also,
we're
yeah,
just now
yeah,
breaking the surface of individuals being
yeah.
open to it.
But I
So
think
the
there
more
are some,
individual, yeah, the more
yeah,
individuals that are open to it, the
yeah,
more that will expound to families.
I believe so also.
And that's a huge dynamic. I do couples therapy, so
Okay.
that's always an interesting dynamic as
Yeah,
well.
that's a really a whole nother beast.
It is.
Have you
Most of
worked?
the time, you find
Uh,
out that, again,
uh,
everybody within the unit also
uh,
needs their own individual therapy.
yeah,
So I think the
yeah,
more that people bite on to doing individual therapy and working through some things, they will be open
yeah,
to doing things like families therapy, couples therapy,
exactly,
etc.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I really appreciate our time here together today. I won't keep you much longer.
Oh yeah. No.
But yeah, just as we look at some closing action steps, is what I called it. Like we
Mhm.
talked about many different areas and problems we're having in the community, how to address them to come together, action
Mhm.
steps we can take. But what would you say for someone who feels unsupported because of the cultural and systemic challenges that we have? Like, as I mentioned, I was going to that ACA program,
Mhm.
and actually, I ended up leaving because, the family is the first political system that we are ever in, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it that way. So all the lessons from political philosophy actually apply to your family, such as
Mhm.
totalitarianism and or democracy, sharing opinion.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're in living in a country where it's people are not coming from the same perspective, like
Mhm.
this, some people who are a little bit above racist and they say, I don't see color, but that's actually it's you still denying the whole experience. It's like a little
Exactly.
baby step up, but it's,
Mhm.
and so the problem becomes if you're trying to heal in a community, a diverse community of people who don't understand your perspective and that you are still under pressure to this day,
Mhm.
you know, um, I think that requires something different, and
Yeah.
maybe it's not therapy, maybe it's, even basic at the community level,
Mhm.
building better neighborhoods or
Yeah.
creating neighborhood events or like block parties like we used to have. I don't know. I used to remember those all the time when I was little. I don't live in the US now. Maybe they still do that, but I mean, something to create more of a sense of community to save that within ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think that's something that we really need to work on in our community because outside of that, how do you encourage people to build a sense of community in these tricky times that we have today?
It is hard. And the crazy thing is, everybody has resorted to going online for everything. We've
Yeah.
even gotten away from just sitting and having a meal and talking. You
Mm.
can look at a group of friends at dinner and everybody's on their phone.
Yeah, literally.
Everybody's scrolling or like you have people in front of you and you're still engaging with people on the internet, right?
Mm,
So it is a cultural shift that has become difficult to combat in terms of that.
yeah,
But things like you said, holding events where people can come and, network or even discuss certain things. It's something I took for granted in Atlanta. I will say
yeah,
that. There it's a predominantly Black city, Atlanta, not Georgia. Don't get it twisted if you're not from Georgia. Atlanta
yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
like predominantly Black, and there are plenty of like events, and whether it's fun or some educational, some business oriented, that exists for
Yeah,
people to attend to. So going to things like that, hosting things like that kind of help assist with building community in this field. Doing some of the similar things is just holding space for people to come in, having mixers, different things like
yeah,
that. Speaking of online, I was scrolling last night and apparently there's this high school. I don't know what city it's in,
yeah,
but with the high school, this teacher, she had predominantly Black students, and
mm,
she would hold space for them to talk about where they were mentally and how they were feeling and what they were doing, and applauding them for being vulnerable,
yeah,
and helping young Black men especially understand like it's okay
yeah,
to express yourself. It's
yeah,
okay to have a vulnerable moment and admit that you're not strong or you're being you're sad because
Yeah.
something traumatic has happened to you that day. In
Yeah.
this specific space, she was talking to a young man who had just lost his father, and
Mm.
he openly admitted that he was being nonchalant on purpose
Yeah.
to hide the pain that he was experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so having things like that where we make it normal to
Yeah.
discuss our feelings, where we make it
Yeah.
normal to talk about things in depth that are beyond surface level or past
Yeah.
more than just partying and all this other stuff. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it'll kind of help formulate that space for this to be the norm. And it
Yeah.
spreads, it's
Yeah.
contagious.
Yeah. It
Tabitha
does.
Brown said it best. We all have energy and we all have the power to shift any space that we walk in.
Yeah.
She said it in the sense like, prime example, let's say I showed up today and I had an attitude. That would
Yeah.
have changed the entire course.
Exactly. Or if you were just tired, or if maybe you were
Yeah,
hungry, or
anything.
whatever it
So
was.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so we have more power than we're willing to give attention to. And in a positive note, if you're spreading positivity and educating people in a good way, it'll
Yeah.
spread. Somebody's
Yeah.
gonna it's gonna each one teach one. It'll
Yeah.
spread.
Yeah. That's good. Thanks again
Mm.
so much for being here. We had a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. So just one more thing. I think you don't have you don't have a podcast right now, right?
No, not yet.
Okay. Do you have a website or something if people want to find you, or if they're around your local area?
They can find me actually on Psychology Today at Brittany Banks, but
Okay.
I'm also on Instagram and
Okay.
TikTok at the dot cozy underscore place.
That
So you
sounds
can
good.
find me.
I'll leave some links in the show notes too, just in case some people want to check it out.
Yes,
All right.
awesome. Thank
Thanks for
you.
being here again. Have a
Thank
great day.
you. You
Cheers.
too. Bye.